everyone, and welcome to another episode of our series with internationally trained lawyers who successfully navigated the Canadian legal market and landed a position with one of the firms for their summer or articling. So today we have with us Tomiwa, who is going to share her experience about how she moved to Canada and how she navigated the recruitment process to land a summer position. So Tomiwa, I'm going to let you share your background and a bit about the path that led you here.
Okay, sure. As Yonida mentioned, my name is Tomiwa Ogudipe. I'm originally from Nigeria. I'm currently an LLM student at Osgood. And prior to that, I got my first law degree in Nigeria. I practiced for about 3 years. I think then I was more of a generalist. I did both disputes and corporate, but mostly disputes. And then after about 3 years, I went to the US for my master's at Harvard, and that was 1 year. And then I worked for a boutique law firm, and we specialized in corporate law, strictly corporate law. So I didn't do anything that had to do with disputes in the US. And then I moved to Canada in 2020. So I was working remotely for the law firm from Canada. And then in 2022, I took a gap year up until 2023. And then I decided to come back to law. And it was a question of if I wanted to go back to the US or start afresh in Canada. And I decided to start afresh in Canada because I have family here. And so that was my decision. And then from there, I went to do my master's at Osgood. And I went through the OCI process for the 2L summer program, and I got into BLG. So that's the summary of my background. Yeah.
That's amazing, and congratulations. You actually addressed one of the questions that I would have is a lot of foreign trained lawyers started this somewhere else or studied somewhere else and they move back. So this is something that usually comes up in the application process or in the interviews where they're asked, why Canada? Are you going to stay? Are you a liability? Are we going to train you and go back to wherever? So you mentioned that you have family in Canada, so that's a very good incentive to keep you here. And it kind of comes up naturally in the conversation. So that's great.
Yes, I've had a lot of people ask me why I left the US for Canada, like every conversation. And it's like, I do have family here. So like,
that's great. Yeah. Because there was a flow of a lot of associates or partners moved to the US in the last few years. So this is something that they would ask you what keeps you here. That's great. Thank you so much for the background. So for the next question, we're going to structure this in terms of the timeline that you followed, like how you approached the recruitment process, how you applied for OCIs, how did you prepare the application package, and then the process itself, like the OCI experience, the firm experience. So let's start with the first part of how did you apply for OCIs? Did you know about OCIs? How did you learn about this?
So I made the decision to come back to law like mid 2023, and I sent in my applications for Osgood in May, I believe. So I knew nothing. Like at this point, I wasn't even sure exactly what I wanted to do in Canada. I just knew I wanted to come back to law and I wanted it to be in Canada. So I didn't know the timing, the timelines for application. I didn't know anything. So by the time like I settled down to like read my what I call the admission materials, like the materials that were sent to me by the school. And I went through we have this platform that all students are on. And I was like, wait, did I just miss the application period for articling? Like I found out literally the week after the recruit, like the deadline for sending your applications, like that's when I found out about the articling. So I already missed that. And so the next question was, I had to sit down and ask myself, what exactly do I want to do? Like, and I was like, okay, so I want to work in big law in Canada, and the articling period is over. What is my next option? So that was the 2L. And then I found out about it. And then the platform had materials about it, like what the timing was, what you needed to submit. And there was a session by Michael Tam, and he had referred to the ITL NC platform for the VI portal. So I went on it, I checked about it, like I read, I did like simple research for about a week just to understand what it was all about. And then I realized that, the 2L is usually a pathway to articling. Like there are different pathways, right? But this was one of the paths. And I was like, okay, sure, And I think for me, I approached it more as whatever the case is, it's experience. Like, for me, it was, I'm thankful that I have options, but I was like, this is something that I really want to do. So I'm just going to do it and see where it takes me to, and just enjoy the process. So that was my mindset with it. So that was how I found out about it. I found out about the timing, and I had literally 2 weeks to apply.
Okay.
Yeah. And so with this, because I didn't know about it prior to, this time, I didn't have the opportunity to reach out to lawyers or like previous students. I didn't have that opportunity. So what I did really was like kind of hunkered down in my house, and I reached out to my personal network. So my friends, my colleagues that I had people like read through my resume, people read through my cover letter, and I was like, you know what, just be as honest as possible. I would not take offense. And so that happened. And then again, there was this session that I listened to. I don't know if I'm going too far from the question you asked.
No, not at all.
Okay. So there was this session that I listened to. I think this for me was what made the change for me, or it clicked in my mind, like that my resume and my cover letter needs to be different. So there was something that in one of the sessions that I watched that Michael had done, he said something about how, and he showed practical example, like he had a resume on, like a cover letter up, and he was like listing where the problems were. And it was more for our cover letter, we tend to repeat what is in our resume.
Yes.
And he's like, no, don't do that. Like you want to tell a story. You want to humanize yourself. I'm paraphrasing, right? But you want to humanize yourself. So even if you're going to repeat anything from your resume, you're using it to tell a story. You're not just saying, I graduated from this school and this is what I have done. You're like, I did this because I want to do it. Like you're telling a story about who you are as a person. And so that just clicked. And then the second thing he had said was, we tend to generalize, like in our resume or our cover letter. You're talking about how I led the deal to do to raise $1 billion. But the thing is, what exactly did you do in that deal? As opposed, we know that you have done this, but it's like, what exact, did you draft a document? Did you revise something? So that was like the thing that made the change for me. And so because of that, I went back. And so it was a very tense 2 weeks. Very tense. And but thankfully I was able to send in like my applications by the deadline. Yeah.
That's amazing. And you had 2 weeks. I was going to ask because generally what I've seen in the past is that it's helpful to go and meet with the law firms, with the student directors, with the lawyers to kind of understand and maybe add their names if they give you the permission on your application package to make it more personal, that I have done my research on your firm. I'm not just relying on the website. But you had 2 weeks, which is great. So now I want to learn more about how you prepare your application package, because you didn't have the time to personalize it for the firm. So you relied on information that you could find online, I can imagine.
Yeah. Yes.
And how many firms did you apply to? Do you remember?
So it was about 23 firms. So what I did was when I went on VI Law Portal, I went through all of the law firms that were, open for the applications like that, were listed there. I went through all of the firms, and then I went through like from VI Law Portal, I'll go to their website, look at their practice areas. If there's something that, if it's something that I was not interested in, I would just like take them off of my list. And so I did all of that. And so I cut short the list. And from there, I started researching into each firm's like summer program. What do they do during their summer program? The number of people they have. I went to NALP. I checked them. I looked through like some of the people on their website just to see the type of work and type of people they have and type of work that they did. So I did that for all of the law firms. And then I picked out about 5 of them that I was like particularly interested in. And then I tailored for this 5. Like I tailored my resume for each 5 of them. All of this within 2 weeks.
It's a lot, I can imagine.
It was a lot. It really was a lot. And then I tailored my resume to this 5 law firms. And then because every law firm that I picked, like they had similar practice areas. So even though I tailored it to just 5, it was easier to then tailor the 5 different ones to like the rest that I had on my list. But like
you had 5 versions. Yeah.
Yes. So it was like that. And also I went on I went on Reddit. It's a very useful source.
I've heard.
And I also went on the law forum because I think for me, there was my fear that, there were certain things that I might not understand the context of because I literally just started my LLM. I had not had, I had not taken any class. So I didn't know if there were like abbreviations that I should be aware of, if there was like timing, that the students are more aware of than I am. So I did all of this. So that was what I did for this 2 weeks. So that was how I drafted my documents.
Nice. And for these firms, because when you go on their websites, you kind of see that they have very similar practice areas, like especially the big law. They're full service firms of litigation, corporate, etc. What I did in the past that helped me is to go to an ILP and see how many lawyers they have in each practice area. So that gave me an idea about how big that practice area was because they may have had IP or corporate or litigation, but their litigation might have been 3 times bigger than the rest of them. So that gave me an idea about how many students they would hire in each area of law.
Yeah.
And my chances of being hired in each of them. When you prepared your application, were you focused on one area of law? Like, did you tell them that I want to do corporate? Were you a bit more general? How did you approach that fact? Because what I've seen is that even for JD students, they kind of know what they like. They've done the moots. They've probably done some contract law. So they kind of know that what they like most. So they still choose one area over the other. And I see this as buckets. You cannot tell them I want to do both because chances are that you won't be doing both corporate and litigation. So you have to tell them how you see yourself. How did you do that, especially given your background? And especially for foreign trained lawyers, they want to see that if you practice something, you know what you like. You're not going to go there to explore your options. You may be a bit more open to seeing areas that are adjacent, but you're not going to do a 180 while you're with them. So how did you approach that?
I was very specific. Like I was looking for strictly corporate. I was not going to do disputes like that. I was extremely specific. And so for that, what I did for my resume, because I do have some background in disputes, I tailored my resume to corporate. So I focused or I emphasized more on my business, my corporate experience. And so that meant I had to I had to strategize. I had to know what is going out of my resume. Like it's important. What I did is I feel like what I have done, my career is important, but I wanted to tell the story. And my story is I am a corporate lawyer with a corporate background and I can do corporate work. So I took out except if maybe it was really something that showed my ability to maybe lead a team or to work on high things that are like high profile. For instance, I worked on the election petition for the presidency. So that I left, even though it was not corporate. But again, there was a reason behind that because it was a high profile disputes but the other things I was very specific. And then another thing I did was I researched some of the things that I did in the US. They do it in Canada also, but maybe under a different term. What I did was I researched what it's called in Canada, and then I put it in my resume. So it's look, I've done this, but not only have I done this, I've also done my research in Canada, and I see it's very much connected. It's similar things. I was very specific as to any of the deals that I had worked on that was reported. Maybe it's now public knowledge. I included it. I was on this particular deal, I worked on this and this is what I did. So my resume was very much tailored to just my corporate experience. And then for my cover letter, first paragraph, I put, I'm very much interested in your corporate practice, very specific. I'm no, I don't want to make a mistake and then get offered a position and then have to do something I do not want to do. So it was very specific. And then as part of my story, I put in how, some of the courses that I did, I was specific, some of the courses that I did in the US, it was because of my interest in corporate law. And I tied it to the work that I have done and the result of the work that I have done. So it was telling a story with my corporate background. So very specific to corporates.
That's amazing. because that's what they want to see. And you touched on something that is very important. When you study abroad or you work abroad, you kind of you use terminology that you were used to back then, back there. So if you're especially coming from an English speaking country, there are different ways to describe the same processes in Canada as in Canada, and they see the difference when you're. And I've seen the difference when I've seen applications where you're describing things that here are phrased differently. The terminology is different. They appreciate you doing that translation for them. It means that you're more accustomed. You know what the Canadian system, how it works, the terminology. You've done the work that you will be doing anyways when you start working. So that's very important. And another thing that I wanted to touch on is you mentioned that you tailored your resume, but I've seen students that don't necessarily have that so much experience in one area, for example, corporate, and they want to do corporate, and they were more generalist in the past. So what I've seen them do is list everything, which creates a lot of questions for the employer. Okay, you've done everything. First of all, that gives also the impression that you didn't really focus, and they want you to focus because you become better when you focus in an area. And the question is, even if you can leave, you have to leave them that litigation experience or that other experience. Another thing that would be smart to do from what I've discussed and what I've seen is to explain why you want to move away from that. Because I also have litigation experience. I didn't have enough corporate, and I have to explain my application package, why I'm doing things that are lean more toward corporate, and why I want to go leave that practice area with things that are concrete examples. So I just wanted to confirm that you didn't have to do that because you had a substantial corporate experience. But this is something that students who may not have that can think about when they're preparing their application. Explain why you want to leave a practice area, and don't leave this to the employer to ask themselves, okay, but why corporate?
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you, because the unfortunate thing I think about applications is you are not present to explain yourself. So the document has to explain like your story. So yeah, I agree with you.
Exactly. And the more questions they have, the more likely it's going to be that you're going to be put on the question mark or the no pile. So try to be in their shoes and to see the questions that they have when they apply, when you apply. Perfect. Was there anything specific in your application, how you tailored it in terms of did you address your master's in the US? Did you, because you're coming with a lot of experience as well, so you must have shown on your resume that you're a very competitive candidate. Things about why you're leaving the US. Did you personalize it to that extent to say that I'm moving to Canada, although I practice in the US, I practice abroad for family reasons, or was it just something that may have come up in the interviews?
No, I tailored my cover letter actually. I had a couple of things I had to explain in my cover letter. Yes, why I came to Canada. So I explained, like I touched on the fact that I have family here. I also had to explain my gap year. So I touched also on that fact, what happened and why I took the year off. It was a very brief, like two lines. But again, I put it there because it's on my resume that there are certain time, like there's a gap in certain, like during certain periods. So I need to explain that. So I also tell it my cover letter to explain what happened. And then for my cover letter, I drafted something and I was like, oh, this is wonderful. This is beautiful. And then I sent it to a friend of mine to review, and he called me and he's like, you know that what you put in your third paragraph should be in your second paragraph. So, okay, so it was more like, I think it was something that I had like accomplished, like I was so proud of, and anybody who had seen me would have been like, oh, wow, this is good. But I think we have this sense of we don't want to be too, we don't want to boast too much about ourselves. So it's more like we kind of like downplay our achievements. And so for me, I was like, if I put this right after, I mentioned that I want to work with them, I'm maybe tooting my horn too loudly. Let me just like put it a bit. It's like, no, you want to put it up, because sometimes they don't even have time to get to your third paragraph.
Yes.
So it's really what you start with. And I was like, that's actually true. And so I had to go back and, so again, it was more like I tailored it to explain the gaps in my resume, to also tell a story and tell my story in a way that, I boosted myself up as opposed to like downplaying my achievement. So yeah.
Absolutely. That's so important. The first paragraph, that's the 2 seconds that you have to grasp their attention. And then if you lose that, they may not go to the second paragraph.
Sure.
Okay, then I think we touched on the resources, the research of the law firm, the unique features of Canadian cover. Do you want to touch more a bit on that, like the unique features of Canadian cover letters and resumes? I think you kind of explained that it shouldn't be like repeating your resume, but it should be a story. And I keep saying this to students, tell me the why. Why did you do all the things you did? Because they don't show on your cover letter, on your resume. And tell me a bit about your values when you're writing that, like, because it shouldn't be I like this, I'm passionate about this. It should come from what you've done. So do you want to touch a bit more about the features and the differences maybe with different countries?
Sure. I do agree with you. You really need to explain your why in your, like, why you want to do law, why you want to work in that firm, why you're in Canada. There's a lot of whys you need to explain in your cover letter, right? But you really, and you have just one page to do it. So you have to be very strategic about it. So you want to be like very straightforward. Like if you can say something in 5 words, don't say it in 10 words. You don't have enough space for that. So it's in that sense, you want to be, again, direct and to the point. That's the first thing I think for most of the cover letters that I read through. It was really straightforward. Another thing is, for instance, I was explaining my why, because as you do know, I have like both disputes and corporate background. So it's like, why corporates? I had to also explain why. So one thing I had mentioned was about how I worked on a deal for a company that, again, this deal was on my resume, but now this is how I told a story with it. I was like, I worked on this deal when it was a new company, and I worked on the incorporation in the US and the financing. And with this financing, the company has grown to employ over 200 people. So it's like my work has impact. And so I really like seeing the impact my work has in that sense. So that's something that I did. Like, I'm telling a story of my why. I'm also telling the story of my why Canada. Again, it's different from back home, because I think for most people, we can repeat, so to speak, what is on our resume. And because it's not that, I think the difference that I'm seeing is that here in Canada, I think there's an understanding that a lot of people are qualified, but the emphasis really that I see is, do I want to work with this person? Like, who is this person behind the qualifications? So you need to tell that through your cover letter. So I think that's something that is maybe slightly unique to Canada. I haven't been in all other countries, right? So I don't know. So I don't know if other countries do that, right? But I think that for Canada, there's a lot of emphasis on, who you are outside of your qualifications. Yeah.
Just speaking about working in a team or
exactly, like
all of that should come from your examples.
Exactly. Like, who are you, like, how do you work in teams? Like, are you able to, like, working with different cultures? That's another thing. Maybe if you can possibly show it on your resume. That's, I think, something that came through in my resume. Like, I have, I schooled somewhere where I had to like interact with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, educational, cultural, like just different from me. And also worked in a firm where I worked with people from, Central and Eastern Europe. And hey, I'm from Nigeria. So it's like showing this through your cover letter. Again, like I said, you don't have enough space, but you want to put, like, you don't want to put too much so that everything gets lost. Again, you have to be very strategic about it. Like, even like the thing is, for us to be where we are right now, we have a lot of experience. So you have to pick which ones are important to you, which ones tell the story you want to tell, and then emphasize those ones. So yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Okay, I think we touched on everything for the application process. So let's move on to the preparation for OCIs. Like, you send the application, you're done, you close that VLaw portal process, and now you're in the waiting time. What do you do there? Or if you just wait to see how many calls you get, and then you take it from there. What did you do after that?
I slept. After 2 weeks, I slept. I was so tired. But yeah, I took a break. And I think prior to hearing from any law firms, I didn't do anything. I just like waited because for me, I was trying to be efficient. And it's in the sense of as much as I want to like, start reaching out to people or doing all of this, like I don't know if I'm gonna get calls back. So I'm gonna take my time and wait. I remember I said I was taking this as I just wanted to experience it and have fun along the way. So I was like very chill about it. I was like, I did what I could do within the time that I had. I did the best I could do. And it's at this point, I think I also had to, would I say talk myself up in the sense that like, well, if nothing happens, it's obviously like they didn't want me and maybe we are just not a good fit. Like I know, like, I think that a lot of people might fall into like a negative space in this period, like, oh, maybe I didn't do this well, maybe I didn't do this well. I was like, nah, I did the best that I could. And anybody that doesn't call me back, we're just not a good fit. And that was it. I waited till I got like the call back. Yeah.
How many callbacks did you have for CIs?
So I got 8 callbacks.
Amazing. Out of 20 law firms that you
20,
applied?
I think 22, 23. I think I prepared 23, but I didn't send the last one in. So 22.
That's amazing. And you accepted all 8?
Oh, yeah, I
did. That must have been very busy. Okay.
I guess I did. I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna do this. This will be fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so you heard from them, you scheduled them. How did you schedule them? Like, or did they just give you the time slots? How did it work as a process? Someone calls you.
Somebody called me, and I think the first time I was called, because I was called twice that day. I think the first time I received 7. So I was like, oh yeah, that's wonderful. And I was really excited about it. And they're like, the person that called mentioned that, they would get back to me with the timing. And then later in the day, I got the last call for the 8th law firm. And so what happened was from that day, I guess, I think after a couple of weeks, I believe, I started receiving emails, telling me like my time, what time the interview will be scheduled for, and which platform, maybe Zoom or Teams, or and my interviewers. I started receiving that information over the stretch of a couple of weeks. And so what happened was during this period, this was when I started reaching out to people in law firms, because now I knew which law firms I wanted to reach out to, as opposed to all 23. And honestly, I thought if I sent out 20, I'll probably get people like 8 more people, just 8 people to, to respond. So that was my mindset, because I was also studying for my NCAs. I had an exam. The interview was on Wednesday, if I remember. And I think I had an exam on either that week, Monday, or the following week. So I was just like, okay, I just need 8 people, maybe one person from each firm to get back to me. Everybody.
Oh my God.
Except for 2 people. So I had, I think, 18 people to talk to.
Okay.
No, actually, I think it was like 20 something. So I sent out to it was a lot of people, and I couldn't say no because
you reached out to them.
So I was like, oh wow, everyone is pretty responsive in Canada. This is lovely. This was unexpected, but yeah.
And no one talked about the blackout period, that now that you're in the process, they don't really talk to you because they don't want to seem like they're favoring someone. No one's mentioned anything about that.
Nobody mentioned anything, but I think also the people that I reached out to were not covered by the blackout period. I think I reached out to people who did the summer, and maybe I think at this stage they were done with their summer. Okay. So they're no longer in the law firm. So I reached out to, I think, some articling students. I don't believe articling students are with, I don't know. But I didn't reach out to any lawyers per se. I think for me, my mindset was, I want to speak out to somebody who just went through this process.
Perfect.
That was my mindset. Like anybody that has been through 4 or 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years was COVID. It's a different process. It's not the same. Anything beyond that, things have changed. So it was more somebody who was closer, to the, maybe an articling student or some students, and everyone was pretty responsive. Everyone had time for me, everyone scheduled, anybody who had to cancel, they reached out to me to reschedule. It was very, very pleasant. And for each law firm, I spoke with at least 2 to 3 people.
Okay. And how did you structure these these coffee meetings or Zoom coffee meetings, did you have like specific questions for them? Did you compare? Because you only have like what, half an hour to speak with each of them,
Yeah.
and you have to be very targeted. But what type of questions for someone who is hesitating, reaching out, and they don't know what to ask? Like, what tips would you give them?
Oh, first off, if you're hesitating, I think for me, what I did was I thought about these people as my colleagues, as my own friends. Like I approached it as, okay, these people don't know me, but I've researched them. Before I talk to anybody, I would research your background, right? So for me, I know something about you, so I'm going to tailor my questions to your background, but something that is also similar to me. So I approached it as these people are normal human beings. They're not going to bite me. They're not gonna like, they don't even like, I might not even see them ever again. So it's like, I'm just gonna go there and, let my personality show through and just be pleasant. That was it. It was just going there to have a conversation. I wasn't looking at it as anything really scary per se, because I humanize them in my head. I was like, okay, this person is a regular human being, you know, they're not gonna bite. So that was how I approached it. I had my questions ready. I did also do some research on the type of questions because coffee chats are not things that I'm very familiar with. So I did some research on what kind of questions to ask, how to approach it. There are a couple of websites online that were very helpful with regards to that. And yeah, it was all of it was virtual. I couldn't do like in
Yep.
person because of, I was studying for my exams, they had work. Yeah, it was all virtual.
Nice. And a couple of questions that you may have asked them to personalize it. Do you recall what you asked them? It's basically about their experience. So how do you get that out of them?
Yeah, I think so it would just typically go like, an introduction, explain your background, which I found really helpful because it helps you to, articulate your background. Like the more you say something, the easier it is to say.
Yes.
So we typically go like, hey, how was your day? You have to start with the pleasantries, obviously, before you go. You don't just want to jump right in. You want to be like, hey, how was your day? Have like a bit of a chit chat for a couple of minutes. And then you're like, oh yeah, tell me about yourself more. And then you tell yourself, and some of them might also tell their own background. Some of them may do that, some of them may not do it. And you're like, okay, what questions do you have for me? And so usually my questions were centered around, what their experience was like during the OCIs, if there was anything, why they picked this firm. There was also I asked why did they pick this one? Like I would also ask, depending on the person, if the person was an ITL, I would ask about their experience as an ITL in the law firm and, what's like, I'm not going to be like, what struggles are you facing?
Yeah.
Obviously, right? I would paraphrase it in the sense of like, what were the things that helped you to get, accustomed to the firm faster? Um, for some people that were doing maybe things that I liked, I would ask about their day. I didn't ask that for everybody because I feel like everybody's day is different. But if I see that you're doing something specific that I'm interested in, I could possibly ask about that. Um, I would ask about what are the things that they're looking for, like the firm is looking for in the students that you're employing. I would also ask about if I'd gotten the names of my interviewers, I would ask, hey, do you work with this person? Or some of them would ask me, who are your interviewers? And I would mention, and they would probably just say one or two things about the person, like, oh, that person is so nice. Yeah, this person does this. I've worked with this person or I haven't. So before you know it, like 30 minutes is gone by. Because I took it as a conversation, not a question and answer, type
Sure.
thing. Yeah.
That's great. So you had inside information about their interviews, so it would be easier to connect during the
Yeah.
interview.
For some, yeah.
Amazing. And before we wrap up the prep for the OCIs, is there anything else that you would give, like as a tip that you would give the current applicants? And then we can talk about the OCI experience.
I would say the tip would be to speak about your experience a lot. Just speak about it because sometimes certain things make sense in your head. It
Yes.
doesn't make sense when you say it out. There's been a lot of times like that. So speak about it to your friends, your sister, your niece. If you're in school, meet the career folks. They're very helpful. Watch a lot of videos. I found because I didn't have enough time to meet people, so my resources were videos and online stuff. Do that research. Like honestly, do it. That's really it. Like the journey, it's your life, right? It's your journey and it's up to you to take charge of it. So yeah.
I totally agree. And I feel like whenever I was preparing for interviews for OCIs or for interns or for associate positions, when you repeat your story, it's easier to say it. You you understand what resonates with people. You adjust it based on the reaction that you receive. So it's very important to keep doing this. It's an interview every time because you keep selling yourself.